can be here and that you welcome me. And yes, so I'll try to answer the question you just raised. So how can we fit a chameleon into a standard, and what's about the urban digital twin? So do I have a clicker, or that's the only thing I don't know? Thank you very much. Yep. So what I will talk about is, first of all, here's something moving around me. What I will talk about is about the motivation from a city perspective towards an urban digital twin. Then also we talk about the current standard we're working on, which is the DIN spec 91607. Then the question, why standards? And also I would like, if I have the time, then to talk about the standardization landscape from Germany, and I'll give a little outlook. I wanted to start with this graphic here. So if you just have a little look on it, I think what you see here in the first place is a lot of different spots and points and words and so on, and many, many different areas. So if we have a look, if this works, it doesn't work. If we look for the top, so we can see the analog part, and that's why I like this graphic here so much. It's also from a standard. And it shows about the different areas of a city. You see a motorcycle, you see something about water, so you see different areas from a city, all you know about this. But secondly, it also shows a little bit the built domain, and there it starts from being very small to getting very big. As you can maybe see at the end of the graphic, if you show for the right-hand side, you see even the Earth. So you could even think about that the urban digital twin at the final end will be an urban digital Earth. So when we continue then to have a look, and therefore that's also what I like, is that the graphic splits now. If we go from the built domain, then it moves down into the area of the digital domain. So we have then different areas, like where we have also security and all these kind of things, but it goes down to open data, it goes down to the platform CityOS, and then it goes and shows that there are different people involved. Why do I mention all this? Because many of you know about smart cities and so on. So the thing is that this is the part we're talking about an urban digital twin in the first place. This is the city. But right now, there are coming also different areas from the outside. Think about right now about the ecological part, so-called climate change. We have another part, which is called digitization, where is the technology part. We have an economical transformation we're talking about right now, which is the circular economy. And later on, we might talk about something we call the social part, which is the X-verse. All right, and this all should fit into this graphic here. So how do we do this? And that is, I think, the question where an urban digital twin comes into play. Because what we have to do is we have to think about how can we reduce now this complexity I was just talking about, because we are talking about, I'll take these 4 areas I mentioned, the decade of transformation we're in. Yeah? And the decade of transformation comes also into a city. So we have the reduction of complexity. We need to visualize things so that people can understand it. And also what the guys from the previous presentation just showed, we have to do simulations to make understand what can happen and show options. And finally, I like to call it PIC. We have participation, we have information, and we have communication we want to do with an urban digital twin. So, and how can we do all this? And then there's another thing, we need to also have the local spirit. What you can see here as well is that we have the different areas. We can talk about a little region, we can talk about a metropolitan area, we can talk about a mega city, and all of these are different and also have a different complexity again. Now the clicker I have here. So I hope. Yeah. So, and this all was the motivation also for the DIN spec. So, because the question then is, if we think about all this, when we think about talking about a definition, for instance, for an urban digital twin within this room, I guess we will have lots of different definitions. So the question is, can we have, for instance, a definition as an example? So And if we then think about this question as one part, so the question is then really for many communities doing the same thing, so why don't we have a standard which defines it for us? The same applies then if we think about smaller communities. I talk about smaller communities, for instance, like Munich, let's say with having 7,000 inhabitants. Why should they do all the work such a huge community is already doing and they don't have the resources? So the question is also, how can we create now something where many of the different municipalities in Germany can use it? And the other important thing is also, how can we create something which is then maybe also usable, for instance, in Europe, or at least in Germany, also in international context. Because the other thing is that we can see that already also in the international standardization, many people discuss the subject. That is the reason why we started with this DIN SMEC. And as you can see, and this is really the nice point for me, that we have 13 municipalities which are part of this consortium of 31 parties, that we have the industry on board, we have science on board. For instance, the TU München is on board here as well. And we have also a very important associations on board. In Germany, the Deutsche Städtetag is the organization for cities, and we have the Landkreistag, which is the organization for regions on board. So this means we have a huge part of different viewpoints, and this is also important, providing us or helping us to create the standard. So, and what are we going to do within the standard? So the question is also for a standard to show where's the origin. And if we have a look for the left-hand side, this is a little bit a depiction of the starting point for all of this, and this was from NASA. Back in the 1960s, it was a little bit about rocket science. So you could also think about urban digital twin as a rocket science. So you have a real space object, and you have a virtual space object, and now you start to have the data which is then floating around a little bit. And there then you have different possibilities. Data goes one way, data goes two ways, and so on. What we can see is that from the rocket science, it then continued to move on. It moved on to areas like the industry is 4.0, where you can see here right now, this is really a production cycle. I don't want to go into detail. This should just show that right now this technology or this idea is already used and it's widely used. If the clicker works, there it goes. So the other thing is, when we have a look for a standard, the other question is, can we use existing standards or existing work? Because we shouldn't do the things others have done again. So therefore, we have a look also for building information modeling, which moves into the same direction. It has a clear, we have just seen it here in the presentation beforehand. You also use something around BIM. Yeah? So, and therefore, we also had a look, or we have a look for what kinds of elements of BIM we can use and we can transfer towards the urban digital twin, which is our goal. I don't want to go into the detail here again as well. One important part we have seen is that we talk here about really a project perspective, a phase perspective, and this is maybe something we can transport towards a specification from DIN. This is the question I raised in the beginning. Please don't start to read. This should just illustrate one point. If we talk about definitions, you could take also other words. You could take about smart city as a word, you could take resilience as a word, and you will have in this room many different thoughts about what's the definition. Therefore, we need a standard which then says this is the definition. That's one of the points we will solve, or one of the questions. We just listened also to data. Data is the essential part for an urban digital twin. We have data from the geospatial information, and we have also from a geo information, and we also need data from a time perspective. That's also what you mentioned about, you talked about, let's say, real right time. And so therefore, the other question is, how can we fit all this together and talk about which kind of data? Yes, the word of interoperability will come into play here as well. And then also, what does an urban digital twin transport with the data? This is also very important, because the one thing is the technical thing is the interoperability. The other thing is, what can I do with it? So we are talking about, and we try to solve what can we really do from a data perspective, and you see at the top end something like wisdom. Furthermore, what we also need to solve is the question about the architecture. As you might remember in my first graphic, there was also this thing called urban platform, and there was something called smart city OS and all these things. So also the question is, how can you create now something? Because you also talked about something, we hope that everybody use our platform. So the question is then, is it a standardized platform so that others have the, let's say, reliability, they can really use it simply and very quickly. And therefore, we started here with another DIN spec we already have in Germany. It's the 91357, which is about open urban platforms. And this shows a very simple architecture, and this is the way we want to do. We don't want to have a difficult architecture, but one which is easily to understand, easily to use, and this is what we're talking about. How do we get to the point that this is also then important? Because we can do technology, yeah? In my former work at Deutsche Telekom, I had 3 laws, which I talked to manufacturers. First one was, technology-wise, everything is possible. Second law was, technology-wise, everything is possible. Did you know my third law? So the question really is, why do we do this? And therefore, within this DIN spec, we had a look for the use cases. And we collected around 100 use cases, 100. And then we thought, how can we group them so that we can really depict them and figure out what is really the core. And that's what we did using a different, another standard. And then we just fit this 100 scenarios into this grouping. This is here in German because it's out of this specification. But very simply, you see on the left-hand side infrastructure, you see government, you see mobility, you see you see energy, you see environment, and so forth. And so we had a look for how does it fit into it, and this is where we currently work on to really describe it. And this shows then here, I just use it, I know that the presentation here should be in English, but this just show, and I would just quickly try to explain the left-hand side. This is the Fire Brigade of Berlin. They had a presentation within our DIN spec group, and they said, we have a problem, we would also like to use the urban digital twin. Why? Because the left-hand side is the graphics sometimes they have when they come to a place. And they don't know, because this is maybe the graphic from 1987. But we have right now 22.3. And they don't know if the elements there, the rooms, where is the toilet and so on, if that still is correct. So this was really nice for us that they presented to us the question on, do we have what you said, the real and current data, rather than we have historical data. So just, let's say, from the machine room where we talked with, that was really interesting for us, and we really liked to listen to this presentation. But now I come to my point, and this is the question I raised in the beginning. Why a Chameleon adapts to demands like an UDT? Why do I do this comparison? Well, I guess you figure out where the Chameleon is in this graphic. And the interesting thing why I came to this title is that I had a look also for why is the Chameleon really changing the color? And you see, I tried to really rip it down to the core I wanted to point out here is that it also changes their color to communicate and show their mood. This is something I really found very interesting, because then I thought, isn't that something which the urban digital twin is doing as well a little bit? Yeah. So you just showed it. Yeah. You can show it. You can communicate with it. You said I can just take the link, send it to someone else, and then it tells something to the other person. I hope, at least. Yeah. So and therefore, the clicker and I work very well together. So and therefore I thought this is really the question. Then how can a Chameleon, and this is adapting. How can we use then this with respect to a standard? And this is also what I had to look for finally. So what is really important is why we need to have a standard here for this Chameleon. And this is really that we need to have reliable guidelines. Very important, in Germany we have the rule for tenders. And then the question is really how to create a tender. So therefore we have here, with a specification, a common ground also for tenders. So we have also a detailed compendium about all the different definitions and wordings. And it's also very important that in this place we have also a holistic view due to the heterogeneous participation. We have so many different consortium members. We have a definition and classification. This is also very important. How to classify maybe some words, how to have how to put them into the story. It helps also to do simulations and to avoid rebound effects. And it should be technology openness. We have transferable use cases. That's why we worked on this subject. And it should help, and this is also what we have seen, to see what kind of, let's say, challenges municipalities have and if they are transferable. So all of this is what we're doing. And let me quickly go into where does it fit into the standardization landscape we have in the subject of smart city right now. And as you can see, this is the blue ones. This is which we have already. And the two ones we are working on is exactly the one for the digital twin and another one for data models. But you see also some blind spots, and I hope we can continue to work on these. What we're doing as well in the Dean spec is that we also have a look for the international standardization. And as you can see, we have at least a link to the European Forum. And there is a task group which is working on the local digital twin. They are currently developing an interim report, and we are also trying to be part of it. There is the Living in EU initiative on urban digital twins. I know that Marcus is also part of this one. So we're trying also to have our, let's say, links to what's going on internationally. And finally, I wanted to move a little bit into the Barcamp session later on to show what is maybe something like a little outlook. So the discussion in this international standardization goes also, don't go into the whole details here. I just wanted to depict it. That there is also now the question, can we use the SIM concept towards also an urban digital twin? So this is from an EAC technology report. So you see on the left-hand side something about the information communication, on the right-hand side something about the architecture around it. And this is my last point here. The question is really, how do we see it in the outlook? Because I said also we're coming to the transhuman X-verse maybe later on, from BIM to SIM to Cityverse. This is maybe something very interesting to see. How do we move on with this topic, urban digital twin, in the future? Thank you very much for your attention.